afternoon, gentlemen, a couple of ladies in the room. It's a joy to be with you this afternoon. I have to confess, though, that I'm not the presenter. I am actually here to moderate those who will present. But Dr. West, I also have to concede that after your comments, the only thing left to do was to do the benediction, because the comments were very genuine from the heart, and you can tell the deep love that you have had for many years. That doesn't just grow overnight or because you came to the Bahamas. And in an era where we hear so much fluff and so much instant, it is a joy to hear someone speak from the heart. And so I commend you, and let's give it up for Dr. West. The day has been long, and we have one of the most incredible challenges that anyone could ever be given. Firstly, we're going to be speaking, we're now speaking after lunch, and we're the last session for the day. And many of you have journeyed, and I want you to give yourselves a round of applause for staying. That's important, because one of the things you spoke about is stickability. You got to see it through. And those who aren't here will miss one of the greatest sessions. Why? Because when we start talking about empowerment, and we start talking about resilience, you can't hit and run. You have to be in for the long haul. And as we think about this today, we're going to wrap up with a short conversation today about something that every man in this room, every person in this room can relate, and that is failure. There is not one of us in this room who is exempted from failure. If you've lived longer than a day, you have failed at something. You have fallen short somewhere. And so that creates an opportunity for commonality. We have something in common. We have all failed. If that's not you, raise your hand, because we're going to baptize you tonight. But we've all failed. But when we start thinking about how we help people through their failures, and how do we help them change a mindset that is more resilient, one of the most powerful things that we could do as men is rooted in a question that was asked by, I think, the police officer. We have to tell our stories. For too long, we have been quiet. For too long, we have been satisfied with giving the persona that all has always been well. We don't tell our stories. You tripped and fell, you didn't die. Tell your story. If you buck your toe, as we say in the Bahamas, it's okay, your toe will heal, but tell your story. And so today we're going to wrap up our session and our time together by talking about how we are to be able to help each other through our failures by building a culture of resilience. We know that failing is an inevitable part of life. But feeling like a failure shouldn't be. Think about that. Aaron Brown wrote in his book, Rising, he said, if we would be prepared to trade those moments of comfort and convenience for courage and commitment, we stand a great chance of getting over our failures. And so today, joining me to talk a bit about this, three extraordinary young men here in the Bahamas. Firstly, Deanza Breenen, who is a certified international human resources professional, and he holds a bachelor's in business administration and currently serves as the head of accounting and finance for the SBDC. So please let's welcome Deanza Breenen as he comes. And then he's joined by Dominique J.W. Archer. He told me he wanted all of his names in there. He's an experienced accountant, and he is also, in fact, I think I got that backward. Dominic is in charge of finance. So he's the money man. See how they walk slow? Because they're burdened with money. So there's the money man. And then we have Dr. Leo Rolle, who currently serves as the CEO of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce. So gentlemen, let's welcome them ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome them as they come. As I mentioned earlier, In the last decade, we have heard the word resilience in some form or fashion more than we have in the last 20 years. It's almost like a new fad word, and we've been hearing this. We got to be more resilient. We got to be more nimble. And the reality of it is, when we start talking about this idea of dealing with failure on a global level, on a group level, one of the things that we must not forget is that in order for teams to get through their failures, we must be careful to remember that teams are made up of individuals. So when we start talking about propagating a culture of resilience among our teams, it means then that we cannot simply subscribe to a one-size-fits-all. Because all of us today can have the same experience, but the impact is different person to person. So there's no one-size-fits-all. So what we have to do then is we have to change the way we think and remember that what may work for one person may not work for the other, because their hurt, their disappointment, their embarrassment, their discouragement could be very different as we go. So gentlemen, welcome to our panel. And so I'm going to sit with you for a bit so that we can talk. And by the way, we'd like our session to be interactive. So we'd like to hear from you. If you have a question as we go, as we comment, please raise your hand, and we'll give you 3 seconds to ask your question. Kid you. And then we'll enjoy your contribution. So gentlemen, this idea of failure and recovering from failure, let's talk a little bit. So I'm going to give each of you a moment to share briefly how failure has helped you. She didn't understand that. That's Siri over there saying, I didn't understand the question. How strange. Let's talk about failure. How has failure impacted your life?
Good afternoon, everyone. I can start by saying failure was something, when I look back at my life, that has helped me to get to where I am now. Failure is ultimately a part of the process. That's something that you would have stated before, Jeffrey, that is pretty much inevitable. Having an HR background, I think it's just more so how we handle failure, how we look at failure, and then also how we choose to turn that around and, as we would say, look at the light at the end of the tunnel. So for me, when it comes to failure, overcoming obstacles, I can share a story where I wanted to go off to school when I was younger. I had to work 2 to 3 jobs every time I came home for the summer. Some persons might have looked at that as a failure, but for me, that was an opportunity for me to excel. It gave me an opportunity to gain experience in the work field, and then ultimately, it helped me to diversify and then also gain exposure for myself. So I chose to make that failure an opportunity where I gained experience and knowledge. So for me, I just look at failure as something being a part of the process and something that helped me to get where I am today.
Dominique, how has going through a failure impacted your life such that today it stands as a marker in your professional life?
So good afternoon, everyone. So, as you've said, failure is a part of life. And we're still failing. I'm still failing. And as long as you live, you will fail. But I prefer to think of it more as an experience, and it's all about approach. It's how you deal with whatever experience you have, learn from it, or grow from it. You have choices. You can dwell on it, or you can move on, learn from it, and be better. So that's really the message that I would have for failure, is it's a part of life, it's inevitable, it will keep coming, and you have to keep adjusting.
Leo probably has been one of those individuals who have been knocked down several times by life's, the vicissitudes of life, as we like to say. But when you look at failures in your life, obviously you go through a tremendous amount of emotions, discouragement, sadness, embarrassment? How have you handled those very real emotions in your failures?
Good afternoon, everyone. Great question, Jeff. So one of the things I always look at as an individual is that failure is never finite. And so looking back on my life and looking at all of the obstacles, as you call them, and challenges, one of the ways that I overcome the emotional challenge that comes with it is understanding that in each failure there's a lesson. And so yes, I may fail in school. Yes, I may fail. I'm a lecturer now, so I may fail my students. I may fail, of course, when I look at the job that I'm doing, whether that be on the job or off the job. I may fail in a business. But all of these aspects can teach you something. And so taking that failure and understanding, what is the lesson in this? What did I do wrong? How can I make a change? If this were to happen again, would I do it the same way, or would I do it another way? Looking at failures of other persons also, because if someone has been in this situation before, they have the fortitude and they have the wherewithal to say, well, hey, here's how I dealt with it when I was in a similar situation. And so not only bringing myself up through those situations and looking at the lesson behind the failure, but also having what I call an ecosystem of persons around me that can support me and help me to say, well, failure, yes, is not finite, and here's what you do, and here's how you get yourself through these challenging patches.
So failure is not a destination, it's an occurrence, which means that any of us can expect to fail multiple times.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we set unreasonable expectations on ourselves. I am not to fail. Well, I didn't see you walk on water either. So we are bound to fail. So keeping that in mind, listening to something that Dr. West said in his comments about how important it is, and you mentioned having an ecosystem of people that you can count on or turn to. Dr. West said something that's very powerful that we need to understand, that's more absent in today's environment than ever before. The ability to think about the other person, to be able to love them through their failure, realizing that any of us can fail at any time. The question is, do I have an ecosystem? Do I have a brother that I can rely on? How has having that ecosystem of persons enabled you to get through failures, Dominique?
I can look at it from a more, I guess, professional lens. For me, coming up in my career, I know that some of the leaders I would have had definitely helped to shape my career, helped to shape my future. Many times when I would have failed, I would have had mentors who I could go, who could guide me, who could walk me through, okay, Deanza, this is where you went wrong, this is what happened. So definitely, I like to call them a support system. When you have a strong support system, I think that is the most important part about failure. Because as we all know, failure happens. But when you have that support system to either get you through the failure or to help you navigate to turn this failure into an opportunity, that makes everything better.
You know, interesting you talk about turning failures into opportunities. Isn't it ironic? We spend an inordinate amount of our time when we're going through a failing in our lives. We spend so much of our time on the negative, dirty side of failure rather than on the positive side of failure, where there is a lesson to be learned. There are adjustments to be made. Am I prepared to learn the lesson? Am I prepared to adjust based on what I learned? And of course, it drives us to that point of personal perspective, introspection, right? So it has the ability for us to focus on the other side. Dominic, as we said, we spend so much we've gotten so used to. As a matter of fact, in Bahamian conversations, we say this: you could commit a sin at 5 years old of stealing the candy, repent at 7, but now you're 30 years old. You walk in the room, you know what we're going to say? That's the dude that stole the candy at 5. Right? That's how we are, because we are prone to spending so much of our time. But Dominic, how important then is it for us to realize that every occurrence of failure has woven into it lessons to be learned, and how do we apply them?
So, interestingly enough, I watched a movie this weekend, right, on Netflix. And this movie was about a lady, and you may want to watch it, but as we talk about this...
That's a lot of advertising going on here. You know, we got
movie
Netflix and we got to watch it.
So this movie comes to mind, right? So this lady is a refugee, and she's trying to escape some political unrest in her country. The way to escape is they actually have to get into containers. The containers are then put on boats, so it's almost like human trafficking. But this is how they have to escape their country. This lady is pregnant, ready to have the baby, right? So they get on, just going to take you through a myriad of failures that turned into successes. So she gets on the boat. She gets in the container. As they try to escape, the police come, open up the container. They were hidden in the back, but the police were crafty enough to say, okay, open this up some more. They opened the container filled with people. Police take out a gun, kill everybody. This lady went up on top of a cargo box that was inside this container, killed everybody except her. After they were slaughtered, takes the container goes on the boat, and now she's on the boat. So now she's on the boat. There's a storm happening. The boat now goes into the storm. The container falls off of the boat into the water. So she's now in the water in the storm, no way to get out. The lady is pregnant. I have to keep that in focus. She's pregnant. So now she realizes there are holes in the container. She looks out, just ocean everywhere, right? She now realizes that, hey, she has a loaf of bread, small container of tuna, 1 gallon of water, and now she realizes the desperation she's in. Container is full of water. So now the container is starting to go down. She opens up these containers. Inside the container, they are Tupperware. They were shipping Tupperware. So she takes the Tupperware, starts to plug the holes to stop the water from coming in. She opens up another container. It's filled with big TVs. After the TVs, there's also headphones. So now she's desperate to get food. She can't get out of the container because it's locked, right? I know I'm taking up time here, but we're waiting on a special guest. So as the container opens, as she tries to open the container, she takes all of the headphone pieces because now she's trying to catch fish. She has no way of catching the fish. She then makes a net out of the headphones, catches the fish. The lady is pregnant. The baby comes. She has the baby. She runs out of food. She has nothing to eat. It gets worse. She then has to do, and I don't want to gross you out, but you need to see this movie. She has to eat the afterbirth in order to feed her baby because she's out of food. She never gave up. Eventually, this lady floats. Sharks come around the container. A boat comes and saves her just as she is ready to, as the container is ready to go to the bottom. They save her, and she was on the boat for 41 days. But the point is, she found a way to pivot all the way along. She made something out of nothing. She fed herself. She took care of a baby, got rescued. So there's hope. So in terms of having that spirit of always being able to pivot. Things will happen. It's how you approach it. Now, if she just said, look here, that's it, her and her baby would have been died.
Sounds like a Bahamian. A can of tuna, a bottle of water, and what was it? A loaf of bread. It sounds like a Bahamian during the hurricane season, right? But give up. Don't give up.
She never gave up.
It is often said, Leo, that failure forces us to be creative. Because whether we accept the truth about failure is, it will press on us and cause us to see things differently. As a young man, how has failure helped you? Give us a good example of how failure has helped you to be more creative about what you thought you were doing.
So I'll probably take that from another angle, Jeff.
Sure.
I've worked with Dominique and Deanza for quite some time, and they know that I have a very militant style about me when it comes to my team members.
Right.
And what I had to realize was that while that's good because it does foster a level of, I don't know, people will follow you because they realize that you are the leader, it was also not good because I didn't create an environment where it was okay for my persons or persons that reported to me to fail. And so in being, one, creative, but also having the level of ingenuity to understand that you need to make people comfortable enough to be able to understand that I can fail, and it's okay to fail, but what comes after that failure. And so what I then did was become creative because I failed too as a leader in some instances. And so in helping my team to understand that it's okay to fail, it's what happened afterwards, I then began doing things like coaching, mentoring, weekly checkups, things that fostered the environment to fail, but also the environment to be conducive to know how to get out of that failure and what you should have done in that situation and what you learned from that failure. And so not only have I fostered that level of stickability and creativity in my own life, but I did it where persons who reported to me and persons who I was charged with mentoring also had that level of flexibility and comfort that it's okay to fail and here's how you deal with it when you do.
So, from what I'm hearing you say, failure also produces within us a sense of empathy, which is very much absent in this present world in which we live. We don't really care about the other person. I mean, we live in a very high-strung, competitive, over ultra egos, I don't really care because it's all about me environment. And so people are being conditioned not to really care about the next person. But empathy is critically important because if we who are remaining in this room are going to have impact and really delve into empowering the other person, we have to be people who are empathetic. We have to be a people who says, I failed, it's okay. Let me share my story. You failed? Hey, that's great. Let me hear your story. And out of those stories come several things. One, encouragement, community, strength, hope that we talked about because somebody else empathizes with my experience. And so we think about that, but it also allows us a level of freedom because the freedom in that it dismisses some of our preconceived notions about what we thought was good and right. But it also helps us to really refocus on values and how important the values, Deanza, when we're dealing with failure, Dr. West mentioned things that he was taught when he was a toddler that still sticks with him now that he is X old. Ages, he's X, right? But most of what he talked about were a value system being established. How important is it for us to have a sound value system in dealing with failure?
Once again, I'll take this more so from an HR perspective. I think having a strong value system is key when dealing with failure. I say that because I'm not sure if there's something that is said globally, but I know it was something in my upbringing that my grandparents, my mom would always say to me, you know, manners would take you throughout the world. And from day one, when you walk into the organization, you know, respect would pretty much get you in the door. It would get you to meet persons. And when you are someone that is respected, and respect goes both ways, when you fail, people then have one, empathy. They have an open door policy to understand that, maybe this was not an intentional failure. It was maybe literally an accident. So I think having a strong value system presents an opportunity where persons can reflect. Other persons on the other side can also look at it from a different standpoint, to be that, this is the person I know Deanza to be. This is the person I know Jeffrey to be. So maybe if they did make a mistake, maybe if it was a failure, I can be empathetic, I can give them an opportunity. But if you are somebody without a value system, persons might not be as easy to accept your failure and might look at it from a different angle.
And part of that value builds community, as I said, which also strengthens people who could be, in fact, it's amazing. Our willingness to share that value could be the difference between not just him failing and not getting up again. He could fail and choose to die. That's how important it is. And one of the things I want us to take away from this session today is that, yes, there is value in telling our story, but it's telling it in a way that says, I feel your pain because I've been there, not in a, this is how I handled it, man. I just took failure by the throat and slapped it twice and it went away. No, it's an empathetic way where through the value of love and caring and community. You've been raised in the community. This young man, his parents have a whole basketball team. There's 5 boys. So he's had community around him all his life. Talk about the strength and the value of community in dealing with failures.
That's a great question, Jeff. So I think my life is based in community because my mother had me when she was, I think, 15 or 16. And so she was unable to raise me. And there was a time where her sisters raised me, and then my grandparents. And so while people will look at that and they see instability, what I saw was that the adage, it takes a village to raise a child. And so when I look at the support systems that I've had, they did their best. And what they provided was care, nurturing, and support, even to the point where I would have exceeded some of the things that they thought they knew or didn't know. And so you'll find that there were a lot of times that I had to go to different persons to look for support, to look for guidance, because my grandparents obviously didn't know, my aunts didn't know. But when I think about the way I was raised, I look at all of that. I look at the circumstances, and I understand that truly it takes a village to raise a child. And so that's the power of that support system, and understanding that it matters not where you start, but truly where you finish and how you enjoy the journey as you're getting to where you're going.
Thank you so much. The clock on the wall says our time is up. But I want to leave a couple of thoughts with us as we go today, because, again, lest we throw this word resilient around casually. Resilient means that I ought to be better because I went through something and I was taught, I was nurtured through that. We talk about empowerment. How do I offer strength to my brother? So that when we do get together in the next year, we look at a group of men who have grown. We've grown because of our support. So yes, failure is inevitable. None of us are exempted. Failure does not have to be final. Failure is a great teacher. Failure is a mentor. Failure creates opportunities. Failure challenges our creativity. Failure challenges our mindset. And I will say this as one of the greatest athletes ever lived, I had a chance to speak to on several occasions, and Michael Jordan used to always talk about this one fact. I had an opportunity to interview Michael Jordan several times, and one of the things he would constantly retort when we would ask him, what is the greatest life lesson that he would share? And he would always come back to this: I have failed many times, but in my failing, I had to learn how to get up. And he would tell us how he got kicked off his junior high team and how it forced him to grow up mentally to where he had to go out every day and take 500 free throws a day in order to be able to be a good free throw shooter. How many of us are prepared to do that? Tiger Woods would say he hit 1,000 balls a day to be who he became. The question is, how much are we prepared to let the challenge of failure, because neither of them were destined to be great, but for the commitment to forego comfort and convenience, to take on the struggle to be better. I believe that all of us, as I said, none of us are strangers to failure. But what could change today about this group of men is our commitment to telling our stories, our commitment to caring about the other guy, our commitment to helping him, knowing that he is just as susceptible to failure as I am, and seeing him as an equal and holding his hand, yes, holding his hand, yes, affording him a hug, yes, affording him the ability to look him in the eye and say, I understand your struggle because I've been there. If we're going to create more resilient men and create ultimately more resilient communities, we have to tell our stories. I close with this. We rise together. We fall together. We make mistakes together. But let's also commit to getting up from our mistakes and growing together. Because guess what? You may not get to where you intended to go, but you certainly wouldn't end up where you fell. God bless you. Have a great evening.